All right, so it is time once again to explore the mailbag. So we're going to start with this first letter. Katie writes, "Hi, Allison. I'm a relatively new subscriber, and I have been really enjoying the interesting take you guys have on different subjects on social movements. I really like your opinions and find them to be a lot like mine. I'm wondering if you guys have ever done a show exploring John Calhoun's mouse utopia experiment and how it appears to be increasingly reflective of human social behaviors of today. I wouldn't be surprised if you have already covered this on a show, but if not, I definitely think that you should. Please send me the video if you have already, though. I would love to hear your opinions on the subject. Thank you for existing. Honey Badger Radio gives me life." Well, the video, I guess you're looking at is the one you're looking for could be this one here right now. So, well, for those who don't know, I'm gonna look up the Calhoun mouse experiment. It was.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. They essentially had a bunch of mice, and they had a pellet dispenser on the other side of a lever, and they would have to press the lever to get the pellets. And so they would put the mice in here, and they would train them, and they'd press the lever, they'd get the pellet. And then they ended up putting a whole bunch of mice in the same cage.
Well, that was the point of the experiment. It was to test what happens in overpopulation conditions, I think.
Yeah, and what they found is that there would be, after a while, I think there was 3 mice in the cage. After a while, 2 of the mice just camped out by the food dispenser, while one mouse just kept pushing the lever. And it would dispense a pellet, and the other mice would get it, but after they were fed, the mouse that did all the labor would eventually get something too. And that's basically how it ended up being. There were freeloader mice and one working mouse. And
I think
it says something.
No, I think that's a different one, because the one I remember, there was the National Institute of Mental Health, NIM. I'm serious, as in secret of.
Oh wait! You know what else that's a reference? Like one of *Halt and Catch Fire's season 3 shows is called NIM.
Oh, okay. With the H?
Oh,
okay.
This is apropos of nothing. So there's no H, just NIM.
Oh, okay. So. In the well, here's the mouse experiment that I was thinking about, and I think it's the one that Mike is talking about too. This is, I think, what she's referring to. There was a facility that was built on a property that housed they were building essentially a utopian mice universe. Okay, and the universe was 9-foot square metal pen with a 4.5 foot high walls. Each side had 4 groups of 4 vertical wire mesh tunnels. The tunnels gave access to nesting boxes, food hoppers, and water dispensers. There was no shortage of food or water or nesting material. There were no predators. The only adversity was the limit on space. Initially, the population grew very, very rapidly, doubling every 55 days. The population reached 620 by the 315th day, after which the population growth dropped markedly, doubling only every 145 days. The last surviving birth was on day 600, bringing the total population to a mere 2,200 mice, even though the experiment setup allowed for as many as 3,840 mice in terms of nesting space. This period between day 315 and day 600 saw a breakdown in social structure and in normal social behavior. Among these aberrations in behavior were the following. There was an expulsion of young before weaning was complete, the wounding of young, and the increase in homosexual behavior, an inability of dominant males to maintain the defense of their territory, and females aggressive, and then there was aggressive behavior in females, passivity of non-dominant males with increased attacks on each other, which were not defended against. After day 600, the social breakdown continued, and the population declined towards extinction. During this period, females ceased to reproduce. Their male counterparts withdrew completely. You can call them mice going their own way, or MGTOW. Never engaging in courtship or fighting. They ate, drank, slept, and groomed themselves. all solitary pursuits. Sleek, healthy coats and an absence of scars characterized these males. They were dubbed the beautiful ones. Breeding never resumed and behavior patterns were permanently changed. The conclusions drawn from this experiment were that when all available space is taken and all social roles are filled, competition and the stresses experienced by the individuals will result in a total breakdown in complex social behaviors, ultimately resulting in the demise of the population. Calhoun saw the fate of the population of mice as a metaphor for the potential fate of man. He characterized the social breakdown as a second death. His study has been cited by writers such as Bill Perkins as a warning of the dangers of living in an increasingly crowded and impersonal world.
Yeah, I did a video about this 2 or 3 years ago, I think, before just about a year before I got sort of semi-famous. Called LOVE Part 2, Rules of the Experiment. It's like 40 minutes long. I've since learned not to take the overpopulation angle because it really rubs a lot of people the wrong way. Oh no, the world population's decreasing. Look, you go to the world population counter and it's going up and up and up. And the number's just going, rapidly increasing. And everyone just looks at it and goes, no, overpopulation's a myth. It's not happening. It scares the crap out of me.
So, Alison, did you catch that?
Yeah, I did. Okay, just to clarify, they gave the mice as many resources as they needed, and they just basically overpopulated to the point where they couldn't sustain. Is that the main their social structure?
Yeah, it seemed that the only adversity, the only issue they were dealing with, the mice, was a limited amount of space.
But they never even got to that point, because like they said, they died off when they got to 2,200, even though there was enough space for almost 4,000. They didn't even manage to take up all the available space. The reason the society broke down was because it was an abnormal society. Mice, evolved to be scared of predators and be on the lookout for that kind of adversity. Then if you put them in that environment, then something's bound to go horribly wrong, and something did.
Yeah, I'm just because the thing is that so ultimately what was the okay, so they gave them all the food they wanted, and was there not enough space at all? Like because it's in your write up or what you read, they said it was stated that there was more space, or they had enough space for even more nests, but yeah. Was that enough? Did it accommodate the usual territory of a mouse?
Well, I guess the way it was set up, there were several nesting boxes, food hoppers, and water dispensers. There was also no shortage of food or water or nesting materials. So it would appear that they didn't use all of the resources that were available to them, because there were the setup for the experiment allowed for as many as 3,840 mice, but they capped out at 2,200 mice.
Okay, so basically the pressure here was, I think they ended up with a colony, because I don't actually know the native lifestyle of mice. I assume that they're, actually just give me a second. I'll look up mice.
They seem pretty happy in human domiciles. Yeah, you don't know where they go beyond that. If they, obviously they must occasionally go outside to wander around looking for food wherever they can find it. But clearly,
okay. So what type of mouse was this? Was it basically a house mouse? Was it a domestic mouse?
They were like white mice. So, I guess those would be. They were basically white mice. They colored their fur so that they could make each one an individual and study their individual behavior. So they were special snowflake mice, basically. They were the kind of mice that, like the Pinky and the Brain mice, like they're the ones that you typically do experiments on. I'm not really sure what kind of mouse that is. Lab mice.
Okay.
Let me see. Laboratory mouse are usually mus musculus, commonly used mammalian research models, and used for research in genetics, psychology, medicine, and other scientific disciplines.
Okay, so social behavior, I'm getting this from Wikipedia. I assume that Wikipedia has no political issues with mice, so I'm guessing that this is relatively safe.
Yeah, despite the fact
social...
that feminists are rewriting Wikipedia articles, they haven't gotten to the mice yet, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think they have any interest into it.
They run the planet, don't forget. They built this computer.
Yeah. And, well, you know, like, they may actually get to mice because, you know, they have an issue with experiments being done on men, and we all know that experiments are most likely to be done on rats and mice as well than women. So, you know, they might say that it's speciesist, that we care more about how things affect rats and mice than we do women. So that's why we put these animals through those experiments, because that's the argument when they talk about using men.
Yeah. Oh, let's hope PETA doesn't get their hands on Wikipedia.
Yeah, okay. Social behavior of the house mouse is not rigidly fixed into species-specific patterns, but is instead adaptable to the environment conditions, such as the availability of food and space. This adaptability allows house mice to inhabit diverse areas ranging from sandy dunes to dunes, not sandy dudes, to apartment buildings. Although maybe there have been mice in sandy dudes.
Sure.
Oh.
Like beachcombers?
Sandy vaginas.
Yeah. House mice have two forms of social behavior, the expression of which depends on the environmental context. House mice in buildings and other urbanized areas with close proximity to humans are known as commensal. Commensal mice populations often have excessive food source, resulting in high population densities and small home ranges. This causes a switch from territorial behavior to a hierarchy of individuals. When populations have an excess of food, there is less female-female aggression, which usually occurs to gain access to food or to prevent infanticide. Male-male aggression occurs in commensal populations, mainly to defend female mates and protect a small territory. The high level of male-male aggression with a low female-female aggression level is common in polygamous populations. The social unit of commensal house mouse population generally consists of one male and two or more females, usually related. These groups breed cooperatively, with the females communally nursing. This cooperative breeding and rearing by related females helps increase reproductive success. When no related females are present, the breeding groups can form from non-related females. In open areas such as shrubs and fields, the house mouse population is known as non-commensal. These populations are often limited by water or food supply and have large territories. Female-female aggression in the non-commensal house mouse populations is much higher, reaching a level generally attributed to free-ranging species. Male aggression is also higher in non-commensal populations. In commensal populations, males come into contact with other males quite frequently due to high population densities, and aggression must be mediated or the risk of injury becomes too great. Both commensal and non-commensal house mouse males aggressively defend their territory and act to exclude all intruders. Males mark their territory by scent, marking with urine. In marked territories, intruders showed significantly lower aggression than the territory residents. House mice show a male-based dispersal. Males generally leave their birth sites and migrate to form new territories, whereas females generally stay and are opportunistic breeders rather than seasonal. Okay, so I'm guessing they're going from that mouse utopia experiment. What they did was they induced a commensal mouse population, but they ended up overcrowding them beyond what their behavioral adaptation allows for, is what I'm guessing. No. Yes. No?
Well, it just showed that there was a. Yeah, I don't know what his goal was originally. I guess he wanted to test to find out what the effects of overpopulation would be. So, but the mice didn't even reach the point at which they suspected it would become overcrowded before they started to change their behavior, and their their social structure started to break down, which basically referred to there were male mice that were essentially walking away, and just grooming themselves and not looking for mates. And there were female mice that were becoming more aggressive. And there were young that were essentially, they were being wounded by other mice. And there was more homosexual behavior between mice.
And if you ever notice the difference between country people and city people, it's all rather eerily reflected in what happens to mice when you put them. Yeah, maybe it's just as ordinary that's what humans do if you put because it's pretty much the equivalent of a mouse city. Because a lot of humans live in cities. We can leave whenever we want, in theory, but we don't because we're a social species and we like to huddle together, even if huddling together is the worst thing we can do.
Well, the thing is that I'm not sure how much we can extrapolate from this to humans, because humans are quite a bit different from mice, even in a lot of their instinctual behaviors. We're pair bonders, for one. There isn't a lot of... compared to every other species on the planet, the competition or aggression between human males is very low. Like, exceedingly low. Because of that, we are characterized by more cooperative relationships between human males. And our population density, we can get way, way, way higher than that and just be perfect. And the other thing is that nobody's really understands how big a natural human territory would be. Because that is so far in our past that I don't even think we know anymore.
Doesn't it have something to do with the Dunbar number? Which is
it's like
150?
250 is
150,
generally what,
I think.
No, it's between 100. Well, it might be between 100 and 250, but that's about where, and that's huge, for an animal, like for fairly close relationships. That's where we stop being able to keep track of reasonably close relationships, is about 250.
As reflected in the average number of friends people have on social media.
Yeah, well, and then after that we have to create these extremely black and white schemas to generate a sense of belonging and sort people into you believe this particular solution is the ultimate solution, then you're one of my kind, and if you don't, then you're not one of my kind. It's like a lot of these ideologies seem to be like algorithms or just simple ways of sorting belonging. But anyway, that's a side.
Just to throw it in there, the average Facebook user now has about 338 friends. The median number is quite a bit lower. It's about 200. I was just looking it up. Then there are people who have... I think that where that comes from is there are people who value their personal worth on the number of friends they have. So they add as many people as they can, even though they're not going to actually keep track of them. And they're not really friends. They're more like people they met once, in passing.
Yeah.
So
the median is probably more of an indication of how many relationships you can really maintain to some degree, at least with the communication systems that we have available to us at the moment. Because each one has its limitations. Verbally, you can only really feel like you belong to someone who speaks the same language. Now we have visually, so we can all feel like we belong to people who are under the same symbol, I suppose. But I don't know. It's like, overpopulation is bad. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to read into this.
Let me go back to her letter and see what she said. Calhoun mouse, how it appears to be increasingly reflective of human social behaviors of today. So so she's saying that it seems to reflect social behaviors today, where we have more and more men checking out. So these mice that are essentially going their own way in this experiment. She could also be reflecting on an increase in homosexual behavior, although I don't know that it's even possible to figure out how many, like if we have more gay people now than we used to. I don't know that there's a way of knowing.
Well,
that.
we didn't used to really call people gay. Like that's something coined by a German psychologist like in about 150 years, or actually 160 years ago. And before that, nobody even thought to think of a word for that, except for Romans had a word for lesbians. And they wrote a lot of lyrics on how disgusting that was, but regardless,
I think Max wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think the primary thing that the person who's making this inquiry is trying to focus on is because I hear the invoking of this whole mouse experiment a lot within the MGTOW circles. It's difficult to say. There are some parallels, but I think I'll just go off of what Allison said just a second ago. It's that mice are primal animals and they act on primal instincts. You can't really take what mice do and use them in direct parallel with what humans do, because there's the social element and the emotional element that you have to take into consideration. So like use it as sort of like a case sample, but don't try to read too much into it, I suppose. That's what I do. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I would agree that the behavioral implications of this, I don't think that, to be honest, unless I'm reading it wrong, the mice are polygynous, so they have multiple females to a male, which means that there will in any generation be males who aren't breeding. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the reason why MGTOW is going MGTOW is because it's completely untenable now for a lot of men to have a pair bond and deal with the kind of crap that they're expected to deal with in a pair bond with a woman. Essentially, the government has made it too expensive to marry women because of all of the stupid laws, the alimony, the domestic violence, and for a man who wants children, I'd imagine it'd be extremely stressful to run the gamut of potentially losing your children if you have increasingly fickle generations of women decide that you don't do it for them anymore. And it's like, yeah, that so it seems like MGTOW is more of a response to the way that government is structuring pair bonding now. I mean, it could also be a response to what is proposed as the essential nature of women, which is that they only wish to have men for their resources. And that's, I mean, but even the idea that could be offensive, that could be morally and emotionally offensive to men, suggests that, because if it wasn't, I mean, think about it, if that was something that was just a given in our society, that women would only want men for their resources, we wouldn't get upset or offended by that, because it would just be a given. And it would be considered completely not immoral. Like, it would be just considered just a thing. The fact that men seek out women who desire them and show some form of loyalty and are extremely offended when they don't get that would suggest that that's probably something really deeply embedded in our psyche.
Yeah.
So
aside from the fact that, unlike you were saying, mice, where there are way more females to every male, the human race, or our species, is relatively evenly split, right? So
no, well, I think mice are evenly split too. I'm just saying that they mate in polygynous fashion. So there's one male for multiple females, and probably one of the reasons why is throughout all of mice evolution, one female could provide for her own pups. She doesn't need the contribution of a male.
Do you think we have anything to learn from wolves?
I actually think in this instance we should probably go with prairie voles, and do a population study on prairie voles, because they pair bond too, and they also seem to pair bond in breeding colonies, and that might actually be a better correlation to what we would be going through, because I don't think mice are really. Their social unit is not the nuclear family or male female pups.
Yeah,
but
it's more like a harem thing.
They're male female pups.
Yeah,
it's more like a harem thing. So it would be interesting to find out if this population or this experiment was replicated with an animal that more resembles our own hormonal systems. Because male prairie voles, I think that's prairie voles, it might be another type of vole, but male prairie voles do mate with a female vole. They become attached to her, they become attached to the cubs, and they both take care of them, which is a much better model for what humans do than what mice do. And and
that's
also
pretty much
think
a given for all of these mice experiments, though, isn't it? I mean, most of these experiments we have to do on mice because they're the only things we're allowed to do them on, and they all come with this caveat of, yes, we know it's just mice, but they have enough in common with us in terms of, I don't know, whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
I guess they're mammals
obviously
too,
it doesn't line up exactly with humans, just like the way they react to whatever they do with makeup isn't exactly how humans will react, but they do it because they can get some information. That's all.
There's probably
You can get some
there's probably
information.
limits on what they're like what species is considered ethical to experiment on, and it limits what scientists can use, amongst which are mice. And it's also limited by space. Like you couldn't have a chimpanzee utopia to test, on chimps. Not that they would be the best, either, but because that would just be too expensive.
No, but here's the thing. Here's why there are several reasons why this isn't a good model for humans. One, human children in the wild do not survive without the resources of multiple adults, including their father. Period. Mouse pups do. So it's like this is actually not a huge change for them to go from a situation where female mice are able to support their pups to female mice are also able to support their pups on their own. It's a huge change for humans, like a massive, mind-boggling change, to go from a situation where all the family members need to pull together to get a kid, and most often they aren't able to do it anyway, but get a kid to reproductive adulthood. And what we have now, which is more like women can go on the state and they don't need anyone else to get their kid to reproductive adulthood. That is something that's not, it's very, very different. That's a very different change. And I don't think that the mouse utopia really captures that. Because, like I said, mice are used to single motherhood, essentially. The polygynous, I don't think mice really contribute to the upbringing of their children. They simply have a territory that they defend with females in it. So it doesn't work.
So if anything, what happens in the human utopia will be even worse.
Probably.
Right?
Yeah, no, it will be worse, and it'll be it'll break down, I think, on more vectors than everybody's pissed because they don't have a territory. And I think that's what we're seeing. So I guess you can, I don't know, I would be really leery of drawing any parallels from this to human society.
But a lot of people's knee-jerk reaction is, it wouldn't be that bad for humans. But as we've just demonstrated now, if anything, it would be even worse. So that's what this experiment tells us. It gives us a fraction of a glimpse into the nightmare that could be ahead of us.
Well, yeah, because there's lots of things that we do that mice, mice don't. We have an understanding of our territories being intellectual or mental, rather than just purely physical. And we pair bond, and we have a really elaborate social system to support pair bonding, and not just pair bonding, but pair bonding in the context of many pair bonds together in a sort of quasi-hierarchical structure. So the mice are so simple. But then again, having said that, we're also a lot more flexible emotionally, at least when we have fathers. When we don't, I guess we turn into mice. I don't know. There you go. That's what I have to say.
Does anyone else want to add anything to that before I just go on to the next letter? No? Okay, so the other thing, there is a criticism letter, and I think this is another one that I thought you would want to respond to, Allison, if you're interested in. Okay. So we'll try to make this brief. Where is it? Crap, I lost the space. Here we go. Okay. Elliot writes, "Hi, I watch and subscribe minimally to Badger Stuff. I'd pledge more money, but don't have it right now. You know the drill. Before stating my minimal but important criticism, I want to say that I am so glad you asked for criticism. It really demonstrates your sentiency. And the only people who drive the world are sentient people. The rest just panic. Anyway, my criticism is minimal. I dislike your subject choice for Honey Badger Radio and any serious podcasts. I watch the less serious podcasts, such as Rant Zerker. The reason and methodology is very simple for me. I find intent-based subjects less interesting than response-based subjects. Part of my reasoning for this is that I'm intelligent and sentient enough to already understand the intent, and so I only listen for additional tidbits of information. These additional tidbits of information always come as tangents to whatever is being discussed. Very simply, response-based subjects produce more tangents than intent-based subjects, so I watch those more. So, I see the subject of Honey Badger Radio Cast, and I think, I already know the answer to that question. Do I have any reason to watch this? So my related advice would be, go deeper. Honey Badger Radio is old enough now that maybe you need to go deeper. I might like to see more guests, but I'd only like that if you were to ask them the hard questions and then respond to their answers. Alright, that's basically it.
So he wants us
Okay.
to sort of include a more philosophical angle in some of our shows.
But not intent based.
Yeah. Well, this is just his sort of thought, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess it was sort of a stream of thought. Well, okay.
And at least it is
Okay.
constructive criticism, by the way. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of what we get is the veiled destructive stuff. Just to point out, yeah, this is the other kind. Yeah. So do more of this, please. Thank you.
I would. Okay, so what I would open up with is, why is the serious podcast necessary? I think that while it's true that people like Elliot here may know the answers to these questions, I don't think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, these shows are for those people. I think that we talk about the serious stuff on our shows, such as the Thursday show, for people who are being exposed to us for the first time, or they're still struggling with certain aspects, or they want to see certain subtopics underneath the topics of men's rights or human rights or whatever discussed, and they're looking for more information, and they want to know that we take the material seriously, and we're doing more than simply responding to feminism, for example. You know.
Well, we used to have guests on the main show because it was one of our only shows. Now we've sort of we've shuffled all the special guests into the fireside chat, and everything's sort of become very divided in that way. That might be what they're getting at. It's sort of the podcast and the regular show are kind of just news shows at this point, where a panel just breaks out the recent stories and talks about it, which is for people who like that, But maybe we could reintegrate it. Maybe there was something nice about, I don't know, everything being thrown into the same show to some
The
degree.
last two shows we had on Honey Badger Radio had a panel of guests on both of them.
Yeah.
So
I think that where it's at now is the Polecast or Polecatcast is a news show, and the Thursday show takes a specific topic, such as domestic violence, or do we need feminism in the third world, or whatever, and we talk about it, and then if we're applicable, so it's not even talking about events, it's actually discussing ideas, and then where applicable, we get guests. So on the last show, we had 3 great guests: Jyoti Tiwari from India, Habib, who's from the Middle East, he lives in Saudi, and a Yemeni woman, Maria Al-Masani. And they were all talking about whether or not feminism is needed in the third world. Not really event-oriented, more like idea-oriented. I think that those are the kinds of topics or the kinds of approaches that make the Thursday show special. Is the question of whether or not feminism is needed in the third world obvious to someone like Elliot? I suppose so, but there is still, if you look, in other spaces in corners of YouTube and the blogosphere or whatever, there are a lot of people that would, and people that normally we agree with on a lot of other things, that would make the argument that it is necessary in those places, or even historically necessary. And so we're challenging that notion by saying, well, maybe it's not. Or if we're going to go there, there are certain things that we should certainly be careful of. And these are the things that those other bloggers and YouTube content creators are not gonna go there, because they're not thinking about those things. I think that is going deeper, isn't it?
yeah, I would say it is. Also, we do have different formats for a reason. If you don't like other formats, that's fine. You don't necessarily have to watch them. And I disagree that we're not going deeper. I think we do, but there's different ways of approaching that. Like, I try to go deeper in the more solo stuff that I do with in conjunction with our illustrator and animator Eduardo, who I know I butchered his name.
Eduardo sounds right.
And
Sorry?
Eduardo,
Sorry?
that's how you say it. You didn't butcher it.
okay, all right. So like I'm trying to go deeper with that, but it's hard to go deeper in a panel necessarily, simply because you're responding off the cuff. So by necessity it's a little bit more shallow. However, it can be very useful for presenting an opportunity for people to think themselves. So they listen to the different people talking about something, and it inspires them to continue the discussion in their own head, rather than just presenting something in the form of a lecture, which is not a really good way for people to learn. Discussions are good ways for people to learn, lectures are not. So you may not need to join in on the discussion because you already know what you feel you know, which is everything about this particular subject matter, which is fine. But I think the discussion invites people who don't already know everything to just learn a bit more, and that's a lot of people. There are a lot of people out there who know nothing about men's rights, or nothing about the gender dynamic stuff that we talk about. Nothing about any of it. And discussion is the best place for them to start learning and start thinking about it themselves, which is really the end goal, getting people thinking. And, not necessarily getting them maybe away from thinking that they know everything. So that's what I would say. I think we have different shows for different reasons, and that's the way we roll.
And plus, like Honey Badger Radio, we're only going to continue to evolve. If you guys want to see more stuff in regards to just approaching philosophical issues that do encourage that discussion and that self-reflection, like Allison said, like put it in the comments below, and it's something that we'll definitely consider. After all, we're very big supporters of the free market of ideas, evidently. So there you go.
There you go. All right. I don't know that there's much else to say, but I hope that helps give you a better idea of where we're coming from, Mr. Elliott. So, all right. So I guess I'll move on, and Allison, if you need to take off, that's cool.
Yeah. I guess I can put my seat as empty.
If you wish. Oh, that would be funny. Yeah.
Right.
Empty the seat.
Just make her avatar just like slide down under the desk and be like, where did she go?
I don't know how to do that, but I think I can figure it out, though. I'm not sure how to do that.
No, I
What are
can do
you
that.
doing not under the desk?
Yo! I want to fuck your mouth. What am I, a puppet? I'm a puppet. What do you want me to do? Fuck your mouth. Oh Jesus. Okay, I'm going now. Bye.
She's got zerking to do. Zerking, I say.
Please don't ever put me under the desk, Brian. Please. I can't. You're a dog, and that would just.
I get accused of being a fur fag now, even though I don't know where it comes from. I think that people just see an animal and they think that guy must be a furry. Nobody else in Honey Badger Radio gets accused of it, though, even though they're represented by badgers and pandas and other animals and yellow people. Only me. All right.
I'll boot up the cartoon soon again, and then we'll start getting all that shit.
There you go.
I'll boot up the Otherkin fantasy world.
Spread the accusations. All right. This is a really long comment, but I think I'm just going to skip to the teal deer because it's probably the core of what we're talking about here. And this is just something I want to respond to quickly anyway. So Kilroy wrote this really long email, but I'm going to skip to the TLDR part. And it says, I'm tagging Brian for No True Scotsman for his comments on communism on a show I watched recently, to the effect that, quote, real communism has never been tried, unquote, is effectively the same as saying, quote, real feminism is about equality, unquote. I am also calling out the Badgers collectively for talking out of their bums on conscription. Stop talking about a draft for women. Equality or not, they just don't make as good a soldier on average as men. Conscription has its uses if you want to win wars and not drive your volunteers into the ground, and being in college/university was no defense to being drafted in the Vietnam War. All right, so Kilroy, about the communism thing, I'll explain why the when I said real communism has never been tried is not the same as real feminism is about equality, and it's about intent. When feminists say real feminism is about equality, they're dodging accusations that feminism is not about equality, and it's about essentially giving women special privileges, or at least giving women equal rights but not equal responsibilities to that of men. And that's me being completely charitable and going outside of the stuff where it's essentially just a bunch of whining about stuff like air conditioning. So the difference is that when I said real communism has never been tried, and maybe I didn't word it very well, I'll accept that. What I meant by that is that when you look at what real communism was supposed to accomplish, no one in history has actually ever been able to accomplish it. But I'm not defending communism. My point is, it does not work. Like, it's a good idea, but it doesn't work in practice. No one's ever succeeded, even if they've called themselves communist countries. Even if, like, the closest we've ever come to true communism is not really communism, but the closest we ever come to it is North Korea. And North Korea does not do communism either, because it cannot be done, because there is a limit on. The only way it would work is if communism was essentially spread all over the globe, and even then it wouldn't work because you would need unlimited resources. So there is a limit on resources. It just doesn't work. So the closest that any nation has ever come to actually accomplishing it is socialism, and the socialism is on the road to communism. I believe that Lenin himself said the goal of socialism is communism. So, but communism was never achieved. It's like a race where the finish line keeps moving away from you. It just can't be done. So this isn't me saying I like communism and I wish that, we had tried it. That's not it at all. That's me saying it doesn't work, and I don't get why people are still trying it. So
yeah, it's utopian by nature. I mean, to say feminism is about equality isn't to say that once we have equality there will be utopia. It's just it's just one possible goal on the path to not even utopia. But communism is just, like Brian just described, it's a utopia condition that's never been fucking reached. There's always just infinite shades of socialism on the way there, and no one's ever got it. Apparently, Yugoslavia got quite close to a working communist system, but it obviously broke down horribly for various complicated reasons. But yeah, this is how it's so completely different from capitalism. Capitalism is always ahead of the goalposts. Capitalism happens without you even trying to make it happen. It's not utopian. It's already there. It's we know it's not a perfect fantasy world because it appears to be it happens without you even pushing it. Where communism's always ahead of the goalposts and capitalism's always behind it. I'm still convinced there's more than just this binary of capitalism or communism, but it does seem to be like one is always in the distance and one is always ingrained, right?
Well, I mean, I don't pretend to be an economist or anything. All I know is what doesn't work. And I think the saying that, and again, this isn't like a men's rights thing per se, but you could make some argument that it is about meritocracy versus sharing, but I don't think that capitalism is. I'm not sure that capitalism has truly been tried to the extent that people believe either, because there's always been, like, at least for a long time, we've had things like crony capitalism and corporatism and oligarchies and stuff. But again, I don't pretend to know a lot about it. I would say that the best thing that I've heard is they say capitalism is the worst. It's like the worst structure except for everything else that's been tried.
Yeah.
So
That's the Winston Churchill quote.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You got to consider the fact that, humans are human. We're all fallible creatures. And you have to consider the fact that eventually all different systems will have some level of corruption, like Brian just said with capitalism and crony capitalism. You just have to consider whether or not you want one particular system and which one is least likely to have the worst ramifications if things do become corruptible. For me personally, I would rather have a corrupt capitalist system than a corrupt communist system.
So yeah, and I mean, again, not saying that there is just a binary. I'm sure there are people who have lots of other theories about what should be done, but I'm just responding to this specific comment. So, for the purposes of the accusation that I am, in fact, a communist, I will be Doge Guevara for the rest of today's show. So,
and regarding the other point, conscription drafting doesn't necessarily mean infantry, darling. If giving a female draft can, I don't know what fucking positions there are. I don't know anything about the army, but it doesn't mean putting them straight on the front line, does it?
Mailroom.
And the thing is, though, I believe that in the Middle East, there are female soldiers too. So, but here's what I would say when it comes to this conscription thing. If you want to remove the draft, make women available for conscription and watch how fast that goes away. And I think that what we're looking at, when I say we should make women sign up for selective service, and I do make that argument, we should, is because it is only when that happens that everyone will suddenly decide that selective service is a bad idea. So, and I think that's because ultimately it should just come down to choice and the freedom to choose. So if a woman wants to go to the front lines, then we should let her. But I think that to force people to go is a bad idea, whether they're male or female. But right now, even though we haven't instituted a draft in a long time, the government still has the power to do so if it comes down to it. And when they do, currently, they're going to send men. And we're not going to have a problem with that. We may have a problem with it in like we shouldn't have a draft, but we're not going to have a problem with the fact that it's men going, unless we change it to include men and women. Then we're going to have a problem. So, and like Mike said, not all people in the military are, in trenches getting shot at. A lot of them are behind computers too, and they're just sort of like taking phone calls and stuff. Whatever it is they do, I don't really know much about the military either, but especially in the Navy, I believe it's like all computer shit. Anyway, if that's satisfactory, let me know. I'm going to move on to the next letter unless somebody wants to make another comment about the conscription thing. No? Okay. Jonathan writes, what is your opinion of anti-feminists who are religious? If you often compare feminism to religion, although you have spoken positively about Christianity, if only in comparison to feminism.
Have I? Oh, is it talking to someone else?
I don't know. I think they're talking about us as a collective. Because again, now that I'm a communist, that means that we all think the same thoughts and we share everything. And here, we're all in the bread line together. You get a gulag.
You're the Dogborg. You're the dog, if you will.
Yeah, I don't know who they're referring to when they say that we've spoken positively about Christianity. I mean, we probably speak a little bit more positively about them compared to other religions. Once again, an example of, which is the lesser of all the evils,
It's the most neutered of all the evils at this point, of the two big Abrahamic evils, it's the most feeble and anemic at this point.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, if you mean, when you say spoken positively about Christianity, do you mean did not run it through the ground in the same way that we have feminism or other, as Mike puts it, Abrahamic religions such as Islam. Um, well, I don't know that those two things are comparable. And from my point of view, I find that oh, you know what it could be? It could be from the one time that I had Dean on, and he kind of went on a tirade because he was getting tired of atheists attacking Christians because he is one, or he's a Catholic, I believe. But just because we let him on and we let him talk about his views doesn't necessarily mean that we are, you know, for Christianity. I mean, I think that we're for individualism and individual freedoms. And if somebody wants to be, at least for me, if somebody wants to be religious, I don't care, provided they don't use that or anything else, because even the non-religious can be authoritarian. You know, provided they don't use that to try to take something away from other people or, you know, use force on them. That's all I care about. So yeah, you want to believe in God? Okay. Just don't use that to take something away from me or other people. But I don't have a problem with Christians in general. I also don't have a problem with Muslims in general. I have a problem with Islam. I think that's a difference, though. So
It also applies to things like being a cyclist or being a vegan. Just don't be a dick about it.
yeah, exactly.
You know.
I don't care if you're, you know, if you don't want to wear furs, but, you know, don't call for people who like to wear furs to be, you know, gassed. I mean,
Yeah, don't be like Morrissey and tell people that if you eat meat, you're a piece of shit.
yeah,
This is you know, the one good thing religious people do have going for them. They do eventually reach a bedrock where they go, "Oh, it's just faith. I believe in it because it makes me feel better. I know it's about this magic sort of creation theory, but I accept that I don't believe it for rational reasons. I just have this belief in my head because it helps." You never get that with feminists. You never get them to reach that bedrock where they admit that they're believing something on faith. They just keep drilling down further and further into the fucking spaghetti mines until they're insulting your family for some reason or another.
yeah. And another thing that's really important is that the difference between people who are religious and people who are feminists is that they are, if they are devout feminists, I guess we can put it, or the most pious of feminists, they are believing in something that is as faith-based and as false and as built on a foundation as bad as religion. But the difference is that aside from the main difference between the two things is feminism can get laws passed. Feminism can get things changed in government because they're not treated like a religion. They're treated like they're given credence in the way that the religious do not. So, I mean, for example, when religious people want to teach creationism in schools and they want to put crazy shit in like the history books about how, you know, dinosaur bones were put there by the devil to trick people, by and large, most people are going to say that's bullshit. No way. You know, that's not going to get put in. And there might be a couple of, you know, really stupid parts of the world that will include it in their history, in their academia. But feminism is in all of academia, like about 80% of it. So there's a huge difference between these two things because one of them is ever present and it's in all levels of our academic and administrative government as well as the media. And then there's religion, which is limited to churches and really, really, you know, stupid places in schools and stuff. But very few. There's a big difference. And if feminism was treated like a religion in the same way religions are, it wouldn't have that much reach. But we give it that, you know, or at least most people do. So I think that feminism is far more dangerous than Christianity is. Way more.
It's a faith that doesn't even know it's a faith. It refuses to call itself what it is. Yeah.
All right. Unless anybody's else, I'm going to move on to the next letter. Okay. Anthony has made an inquiry. Hi, Badgers. I have frequently heard you describe feminism as a religion. Oh, speaking of the devil. Pun intended. But I believe you are wrong. A religion is a dogmatic ideology, but the concepts are defined and the goalposts don't move. Feminism is actually an industry. It is rooted in manufacturing moral outrage, and outrage grabs headlines and sells. As an industry, it is looking to constantly increase its market share, and this is why your goalposts are moving in every argument. Combating feminism on its ideas will do nothing to slow the growth of this industry. You have to combat feminism in reaction to how it is currently attempting to grow its market share. You have to look at the way it operates, and you are correct to call it a cancer, because that closely represents its method of market share growth. It metastasizes and grows. Feminism has its roots in Marxism. It is about defining gender as a class and setting up an oppression narrative. They have realized that wasn't good enough in today's standards, since the law is not only equal for women's opportunity but actually gives them advantages, so they have to generate an outrage that accesses healthy male behavior or accuses healthy male behavior of being oppressive. Then to grow outrage, you have to intersectionalize it and increase the complexity of their class structure to include race, gender, and sexual orientation. They have infiltrated colleges, targeted key degrees in order to get an iron grip control over media, communications, and social sciences in particular, so they can control the narrative and poison/skew the data to support their Marxist strategy. And it's dangerous because it preys on key aspects of psychology, the desire to do the right thing and protect the innocent/women. And it grants people the ability to drive into the state of narcissism by allowing people to classify their own failures, such as being overweight or not being successful in their occupation, as the result of class-based social constructs or people actively working to hold them down. The only way to combat this is to take the same long road that they took. We have to take these majors back, and we can do this. Any college administration staff has to be in fear right now and be willing to insert less radical people into these roles and start grounding their students in reality. And it will become an imperative that they do this if they want to remain employed. The student revolts, because the student revolts will continue as long as they work and they cave into these students. It will take a concerted effort, almost a conspiracy, to infiltrate the campuses and erode the iron grip that they have. And despite this being the antithesis of what people like us stand for, there does need to be an organized effort to combat this. We need our own pendants. We need a concerted effort to create a unified list of talking points. We need spokespeople and celebrities to parrot us. It's the only way to take back the market and suppress those crazy social justice warriors. Well, actually, I think... go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
That's sort of what we're doing, isn't it? You've weirdly worded it by saying we need spokespeople and celebrities to parrot us. I don't think parroting is the way to go forward. I think wherever possible, you need to understand what you're saying. But I think you're saying there's naturally going to be parrots, so you might as well see if you can ride the wave of mindless parrots. And a small point, but it's not all about Marxism. For all the couple of disagreements I've had with Coltain, he's got a bloody good point about Marxism. Marxism isn't causal to feminism. Feminism didn't happen as a result of Marxism. Feminism and Marxism are different symptoms of the same problem. But feminism is just way more successful because it focused on a different sort of area of identity than Marxism did. But it's the same sort of mentality that led both things to come about, I think.
Mm-hmm. I would say that when you look at this, he says that religion is a dogmatic ideology, but the concepts are defined and the goalposts don't move. I do think that if you get into arguments with creationists, they will move the goalposts too. The difference is that we don't give religion the credence that we give feminism. It doesn't. We just don't. We don't think it's credible as a. I mean, when I say we, I mean the royal we. Is that what royal we when I talk about like people in general?
Yeah.
Yeah. And as far as needing spokespeople and celebrities, I think that is starting to happen. And I want to say this too. I am the person, one of the people anyway, that typically reaches out to anybody I can get my hands on, a message or whatever, to ask them if they'd be interested in coming on the show, to ask them if they would like to come on for a fireside chat, to ask them, if they know who we are at Honey Badger Radio. And you'd be surprised at the number of people who are pretty prominent and like they could in fact have very loud voices, and they have confided in us, and I mean in all forms of entertainment and media and academia, that have come to us and said, I like your show, I watch it, I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying, if not all of it, but they don't feel, for lack of a better term, they don't feel safe to be vocal. It's actually reminds me of Gamergate. When Gamergate was happening, and there were, you heard people like, I believe, Oliver Campbell and Total Biscuit and stuff, the louder voices would say, oh, I've been approached by many, devs and people in the games industry that have said, I agree with you guys, but I can't talk about it because, the ramifications it will impact too poorly on my career. And I've had that happen too, where people have come to me and said, I watch your show and I'd be really surprised at who it is. And then they say, but I have mouths to feed, and if I came forward, I could lose my job. So it's just a matter of getting to the point where we have enough people fighting against it, that those that that are that have like the ability to get a larger audience will come forward and speak out.
Yeah, it starts with no one talking about it, and it ends with almost everyone talking about it. And what would the intermediate stage look like? It'd look like this. It'd look like people being in this halfway house where they're sort of half acknowledging it. Maybe a few years from now, they'll be 3/4 acknowledging it. Yeah, patience.
That's exactly the point. We're in that intermediate stage. We're still growing, and we're going day by day. Like, I believe that I came to that personal realization about a couple weeks ago when Milo, Base Mom, and Stephen Crowder were at UMass talking, and everybody in the audience was shouting. I was just absolutely blown away that it has gotten to this point, and I was more blown away by the fact that it's going to continue to get bigger. This is a culture war. And it's only going to continue to simmer and boil up until you get to that explosion point where it enters the mass consciousness of everybody who, I guess, owns a device that they can connect to the internet with, right? And then when that happens, when it's sort of something that enters the mainstream discussion and everybody has to take a position on it, people who are sort of afraid and want to make sure that they can feed their families and not lose their jobs will start to take positions on this. There will be a greater, wider discourse, and then it will end a lot faster than we probably would possibly hope for. At least that's my opinion. Or it might simmer and it might just be very, very prolonged, but hopefully that's not the case. I want to try and be more optimistic nowadays, because sort of the depression that these types of people can inflict on me is just a little bit too great.
No, but I think you're right. I think we are getting sick of it. I actually... I'm noticing, and of course this isn't limited to discussions around feminism, but just all this sex baiting, race baiting, left-right baiting discussion that's going on in all media. I'm noticing that SJWs are pissing everybody off, and it's growing exponentially. People are really sick and tired of being told that they're terrible because they have opinions that don't, march lockstep with what people that believe in this, social justice ideology proclaim that others have to believe. Otherwise, they're bad people. And I think that's getting louder and louder. So, and that's how, in the midst of that conversation that stands in opposition to things like feminism, we have to introduce something that is because the thing is, okay, when you're arguing against feminism, you're if you're just an anti-feminist, you have essentially made an opponent, and your goal is to tear it down by exposing the lies and the misinformation and all of the corruption, whatever you want to call it. and that's cool. But you want to provide something to build in its place if you're going to tear it down. And some people don't have an interest in doing that, and that's totally fine. They just want to be anti-feminist. They just want to argue against them. Maybe they're traditionalist, which is a lot of people that are anti-feminists are actually traditionalists, that's fine too. But we're also offering another thing to put in its place, and it's not necessarily men's rights. It's more about men's advocacy as well as women's advocacy, which is essentially removing the gender, but we have to address the issues that exist in absence of the poorly built feminist ideology, which is built on a bad foundation to begin with. Once we expose and you're done attacking feminism, you are left with, what do we put in its place, or what do we now discuss with regards to gender? Well, there are issues that need to be discussed, and the media is getting to the point where it can't ignore the issues facing men. If you look at it, they're actually starting to acknowledge things like, circumcision and male suicide and homelessness and the divorce courts and fathers' rights and so on. They can't ignore it anymore. And I think that that's how you know that we're in this, as Mike put it, intermediary. And we're going to be able to have that conversation with more people. So yes, I look forward to that, but it's going to take time. All right, next letter. This is from Andrew, who has made a few inquiries. This is the last letter, actually. First of all, I'm sorry for sending you a wall of text last time, and to the wrong address, no less. Well, then we never got it, so I guess you are forgiven. Second, I have an open question for you all. Why do we live in a guilty until proven innocent society? I won't read the rest of the question. Let me finish. Why does it take just a simple accusation to ruin someone's reputation? Who are people so eager to believe the accuser? Who? Maybe he means why. Why are people so eager to believe the accuser? Why do accusers hold so much power? So this is sort of a multi-layered question that's just one question, really. I guess my question was a mini wall of text again, but I hope you get my point. If you won't do an episode on that, please at least answer. Tell me what you think. P.S. Why do you produce so much content? My subscription box is straining to contain all your new videos. Because communism. I don't know why.
Should we produce less? Will you totally not complain if we produce less content? Yeah, thought so.
I'm not sure that it's I'm not sure it's a complaint. Maybe it's I don't know what it means. Why do you produce? Because we like it. That's why. That's the only thing I think of. There's just too much to talk about, and we can't stop.
Because the clicks aren't mandatory. Believe me, if you were forced to watch it as soon as it came up in your fucking subscriptions box, we might be a little bit more wary. But you have to click on it manually, so I don't fucking care, bro.
We could instead, if you want, we could just make one video a week, but make it 6 hours long, and put all of the shows into one 6-hour stream. And then we'll just take it in shifts. So like when, people are awake, they'll do a part of it, and then you can just watch one video for 6 hours. How's that? Yeah, but anyway, going back to the other thing. Okay, so why do we live in a guilty until proven innocent society? Well, I think legally we don't. I think that the courts, hopefully, if they're following due process, we still live in a
male students do. If Andrew, if you're a male student, then yes, I suppose your point stands. You do indeed live in a guilty until proven innocent world. Why? I don't know. Because people are cunts, Andrew.
Yeah, well, there basically what you're looking at, and maybe what you're asking about, is mob justice. Why do we live in a guilty until proven innocent society? Because we live in a society where people generally do not critically think about the events that they're presented to them. They want to have an opinion on an event without knowing all the facts. They like to jump to conclusions. And when it comes to certain targets, For many people, it's easier to come to a conclusion than it is for others. So if a man is being accused of something by a woman, we are more likely to believe the woman, because we are just generally more likely to believe women, and we are also less likely to think that men are innocent of stuff, depending on what it is they're being accused of. It's not right, but and of course that same bias exists in, as Mike was saying, academia. So, for example, if a boy is accused of raping a girl in college by the woman, the courts may find him innocent, but that may not matter, because despite the fact that the courts have to follow due process, the university does not. And so they're just going to go on based on, well, the academics that I guess are conducting the courts, their sort of judgment. And if you know academics, and many of them are feminists, then yes, guilty until proven as innocent. But even outside of school, we have a mob mentality when it comes to whether or not someone is innocent. And I've said this before, but you can look at the Bill Cosby rape accusations. Not only does he get essentially treated like he is a rapist, despite the fact that we still have no evidence to prove it, the media and most people believe that he is guilty, even though there is no evidence to say that. And they're comfortable. I think people like having answers. And so if something is left open, like we don't know doesn't work for a lot of people. They want to know. They want to feel comfortable in knowing. They want peace of mind. And so they pass judgment. They say, well, I think he did it, so now I feel better because that's no longer a mystery. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I can only just offer my personal take on this. When it comes to the issue of sex and physical intimacy, it's something that all human beings experience at some point in their lifetime. It's universal. It's something we all participate in. And, seeing as, the majority of human beings aren't sociopaths, most of us have emotions, we can all be on the same level of understanding of what the act of rape does to another human being. It violates the physical, the emotional, and the sexual personhood of another human being. And because it affects us all, it's really easier to rally and congregate against it, unlike other crimes of theft, murder, those types of things that are only likely to affect certain segments of the population. So yeah, I think that might be the reason why it's easier to mob against that, because nobody likes rape. It's a terrible act, and it's offensive. The only people that support rape are idiots. They're sociopaths. They're not representative of something that is normalized within our culture. It's nothing. It's not a propensity for. It's something that men are prone to doing. Like some feminists might make you believe, like all men are potential rapists. No, it's not true. So I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I just want to make sure that because I know that sometimes we go on tangents when we're looking at letters, so I want to make sure that we got the answer to this sort of multi-tiered question. So why do we live in a guilty until proven innocent society? Well, because mob rule. Why does it take just a simple accusation to ruin someone's reputation? Well, it doesn't just ruin their reputation. It can ruin their life. And even if they are found innocent, their life will be forever changed depending on the severity of the accusation. Like Bill Cosby can be found innocent in a court of law, and that can be put all over the news and everything, and the guy will probably never get work again because the accusations are there, and there are still many people that believe that he's guilty. The same thing goes for Hulk Hogan. He was caught on tape, doing stuff. The WWE will probably never have him back on, despite the fact that, he is essentially their poster child, their icon, essentially. it would just, that's it. I mean, it doesn't matter if he's guilty or not. You know, he was caught on tape, and or I think there was a transcript of Hogan saying some, you know, racial slurs or whatever in the privacy of his own home. It doesn't matter what the context was. The mob has found him guilty, so you can ruin somebody's career, their life. They will be forever changed by that. Why are people so eager to believe the accuser? Well, I think it depends on who the accuser is. I think that we have a bias to believing women, despite the fact that feminists think that we don't. I don't know where that comes from. I think that we do have a tendency to do that, and then when it gets proven wrong, it's sexist somehow because we're applying that to other.
I personally think it's just basically it's hard to achieve justice for a crime that, like I said, just affects so many different elements of the human personhood, you know? And like, I'm not saying we shouldn't get rid of due process. We should absolutely have due process. It's just that's the nature of the beast. And unfortunately, because of the fact that people can't accept the reality around this particular issue because there are so many emotions flying by, that's why you have this chaos. That's why you have the mobs. That's why you have feminists and people like us screaming at each other.
Yeah, when it comes to an accusation of something as severe as rape, it's very difficult to stay even keeled and stoic about whether or not, you know, anything has taken place, or what the details are, or what the facts are, especially because it is a crime that's hard to prove. And I think that if you're closer to the victim, or if you feel closer to them or whatever, or when I say victim, I mean the person who might be a victim, it's really hard to sort of, you know, stay rational. So I understand that. But then it comes down to, you know, due process. Is it good enough? The way that we investigate crimes, you know, the technology that we have. Well, I would argue that it's better now than it ever has been, which is, you know, clearly the case. So our odds of finding a rapist are better now than they have been in history, just like the odds of us catching any other criminal are better, like a murderer or mugger or whatever. But it's still limited, you know. Sometimes we're not going to catch them or whatever. So it just comes down to, you have to make a value judgment on whether it's more important to convict more people, even if they're innocent, or it's more important that some people slip through the cracks, even though they're guilty. And that's a matter of essentially freedom versus security. The more security you have, the more people you put away, the fewer freedoms you're going to have. So the more people you're going to put away that are innocent. And I think that when you put someone away, whether they're innocent or guilty, but especially if they're innocent, they're actually going to, there's a chance that when they go through the prison system, they're not going to be the same. So, you know, you're actually potentially putting more people in danger, because if someone goes to prison and they were innocent of the crime, they're going to build relationships with people who are actually guilty of crimes, and they may actually become criminals. Like the prison system creates criminals too, you know? So that could be an unfortunate side effect. On the other hand, if you're going through the if we're going to go towards the freedom side of it, there's that would involve a very, very stringent due process, you know, sort of policy, and that means that sometimes real rapists will not go to prison if they have really good lawyers, or if it becomes impossible to prove. So that's just sort of like the risks, you know? And I guess it just comes down to which one of these things is worth it. Is it better to put more innocent people in jail, or is it better to potentially let some guilty people go free if you don't catch them? unfortunately, that's just the best that we can do. It's like, it's flawed, but, you know.
Yeah. I've been thinking of my answer while I listen to yours. Empires are built on the backs of the guilty. If you leave humans to their own devices, they will build things voluntarily. But if you force them to build things using artificial guilt, they will build things much faster than they would voluntarily. So, anthropically speaking, the civilizations which run on guilt will outmatch and outnumber the civilizations who run on volunteerism. And they have. Completely. The guilt on which this empire has been running for thousands of years is men's guilt. Mens rea, if you will. And for most of our history, the men we demonized mostly were the men over there. The men far away or the men long ago. Because we were still in competition with the men over there, for one thing. But we're overgrown now with first world problems. There's no worthy enemy left for this empire. So what we should be doing is dropping the threat narrative. Dropping the guilt engine that got us here. But we can't. We're addicted to it because it got us here. We're addicted to male guilt. And so we're doing it to our own men. As well as, instead of not doing it to the other men, we're just doing it to our own men as well. And this is an unwinnable war. We're stuck in a war against ourselves. We haven't figured out how to declare peace in this context. So we're declaring war and calling it peace. We're taking freedoms away and pretending it's for the sake of freedom. And I like to think that we're, Honey Badger Radio and the like, trying to operate as peacemakers or something, and not the blessed ones in the Bible. We're not the meek, we're the geeks.
That's right. All right, well...
That's
right! That's the last letter, so I guess, unless, Max, you wanted to say anything else. I know that you already spoke to this, but I wanted to give everyone a chance.
No, I mean, just obviously, everybody knows our position in regards to these particular issues. Rape is bad. We still want due process, trust, but verify. Yeah.
Put very simply. But yes, I hope that because it's hard to answer the why are people this way without knowing how everyone thinks. But I hope that this helps, give you some idea, or at least gives you something to think about, to add on, because it's a, I don't know, it's sort of a difficult question to answer. But I think the more important one is, why should we stop doing it? So, and that's the more important way to go, in my opinion. So, anyway, so thanks, guys. Thank you, Max and Mike and Allison, for joining me on the mailbag, and thank you guys for writing in. If you want to add on to the conversation, please email us at topic@badgerpod.com, and we look forward to reading your emails. And I want to thank you guys again for joining us.
Give him access to the box.